The reason they like reading my stuff is that I've always got real life examples to prove what I'm saying.
There's a lot of good people that listen to this podcast.
Other than God and my family, deer hunting would be next in line on my list of priorities.
From the bottom of our hearts, it's just fantastic and awesome to have the support that you guys are getting.
People ask me about expandable broadheads and love swings.
Chasing Giants with Don Higgins and Terry Peer. Brought to you by Osseo Camo, nature's most lethal camouflage. Follow along as Don and Terry discuss the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails.
Well, welcome everyone to the Chasing Giants podcast. This is Don Higgins. I'm Terry Peer. We're brought to you by Osseo Gear. Don, it's episode 178 on July 16th. This is going to air. We've had trail cameras out for a couple weeks now. Food plots are going. We got a lot to talk about today. We need to get through some of these questions. We're going to have 6 questions today, but let's just tee up a little bit. You just rolled back in from Indiana with a little bit of a family event. How did that go?
Oh, it went fantastic. My youngest daughter and her husband are expecting their first child in 1st of September 5th, her due date. So they had a big baby shower. It's the first time I've been to a baby shower in my life, but I guess the thing over there is for the couples to go. And, so both my daughters were there, obviously, and my son-in-law Clint's family was there. And I just, every time I'm around my kids and my sons-in-law, I just think how blessed I am that, a lot of people have trouble with their kids or this or that, and just one thing after another. And my kids have given me absolutely no problems whatsoever. And that they both my daughters went out and married fantastic young men. And my oldest daughter has 2 boys. We actually brought one of the grandsons home with us, and he's going to be here for a few days. But I'm telling you, having a good family and seeing your adult kids marry a good person, especially if you got girls, it just takes all the worry off your heart. I mean, when my girls were younger, away at college or here and there doing, one of them was a traveling nurse. I worried about them a lot. Today, I don't worry about my daughters at all because of the guys they're with, and good Christian guys that got their priorities in order. And it was just a day for me to sit back and think, man, am I ever blessed?
Well, a couple thoughts come to mind. Number one, I call Corey the Ninja. I need to come up with a nickname for Clint. So I need to work on that. I can't leave him out. We've made Corey famous on the podcast being known as the Ninja. But the second thing is this thing about going to a baby shower as couples. So now that couples are allowed to go, is it acceptable to give hunting gifts and equipment as baby shower presents if there's going to be men there?
I'll tell you the interesting thing about this baby shower is it was held at one of Clint, my son-in-law, a relative of his. And this guy, I'll just go ahead and give him his name. Derek Fisher is his name. And Terry, in this new building, this building's about a year old where we held this, and there was over 90 some deer heads in that building. There was elk. I bet there was at least a half a dozen mule deer. There was at least a dozen pronghorn antelope. He just got back from Argentina on a red stag hunt. And when I walked in that shed for the baby shower and I seen all those animals there, it was like, yep, this is fitting. This is real fitting.
Yeah. You don't have a problem going to baby showers when they're like that. I could have pictured you guys all sitting out at like a country club patio with your pinky out, sipping on tea out of little china glasses. And, you did go to Starbucks last week for the Whitetail Master Academy feed. I didn't know where you were going.
Well, I did not go into Starbucks. I stayed outside, and I took advantage of their free Wi-Fi is what I did. And for those folks that are not part of the Whitetail Master Academy, we have a live event where people pose their questions on the live event. They pop up on the screen, and I don't even have time to rehearse. I don't even know what's coming next. They're thrown at me so quick. And the Wi-Fi at my home had been down from a storm, and I was scrambling to find Wi-Fi for this live event. And I drove to the nearest town that had a Starbucks, and I knew Starbucks had free Wi-Fi. So I parked right outside the building and took advantage of their free Wi-Fi. And so I'm in my truck. I'm sitting in there in my truck. I got my laptop there on the console beside me, and I've got my headphones on just like I've got now. And I was right across from the drive-up window. Those people that were working in there were looking out the drive-up window, staring at this guy with his headphones on in their parking lot. I was expecting the cops to show up at any time, and it was all going to be live because it was being recorded and it was out there live as it was happening. I thought, man, I'm going to be arrested on a live broadcast for being suspicious outside of Starbucks. Now, wouldn't that have made the news?
I'm surprised nobody came and knocked on their window and tried to order a latte from you, thinking you were the order receiver or something.
Well, if they'd have seen me, they'd have known that probably wasn't my cup of tea.
Well, we talked last week. You spoke of the internet issues at the house. We ran into some problems last week on the podcast and had to finish up with some phone audio to finish the episode. We appreciate everybody's patience, but hopefully the upgraded system at your house will be more beneficial not only for the podcast, but also the Whitetail Master Academy events. And I might even be able to get Wi-Fi when I'm up there staying in the shed.
Yeah, and I guess there's some boosters that we can have in different parts of the house to make it even better. But right now it appears to be working great.
All right. Well, fantastic. We got a big show. We're going to bounce around a lot. But before we get too far into the episode, I want to tee up a segment that's going to be at the very end, and that we're going to play a promo video from our friend Brent Henderson. And Brent is starting a podcast. And first of all, why don't you just take a couple minutes and talk about how you got connected with Brent, and then I'll kind of explain what our affiliation with him is and what we do.
Well, to be honest, I've known him for so long that I don't even remember how we first met, but I remember that I would meet him at the ATA show every year, and that's where I would see him and meet in person. But we would share emails and, social media, private messages back and forth. But, he's got a ministry where he goes around and speaks to men's events around the country. And he's also a very accomplished hunter, and he was he played Christian music. I don't know if you ever heard of Stephen Curtis Chapman, but Brent played with him several years back. And the thing about him that I like so well is how he ties the outdoors into his message. It's not just some guy standing up there preaching scripture after scripture. Not that he doesn't use scripture, but he ties in stories from his experience. I mean, he's hunted Africa and Alaska. He's been all over the place, and he's not just a whitetail hunter like I am, but he ties the outdoors to his message in a great way. And I think his current I don't know if you want to call it series or whatever, but his latest book is called Unleashed. He talks about how dangerous an unleashed man is, and what he means by unleashed is one who's unleashed from the stronghold of sin and Satan, and once you're free of that, you're unleashed and you become dangerous in a good way. And one of the things that we do at Real World is we support Brent's ministry. It fits right along with our customers, as our customers are all hunters, obviously, as is Brent, but try to just do what we can to keep his ministry going. And I just encourage anybody, if they get a chance, to listen to him, invite him to your church. If you're having a wild game supper or something, you need a speaker, Brent Henderson. Look him up on social media, and just a fantastic guy. He's from Indiana, right here in the Midwest. So,
yep. So Brent has started a new podcast. So what we're referring to about playing at the end of this episode is his preview trailer for the podcast Unleashed. And I'm not sure what all platforms it's going to be in. I'm assuming all of them. I do not know if it's going to be on MTech or the call-in services for our folks that don't have internet. I'll try to guide him with as much knowledge as we have in navigating that. But Brent's new podcast is called Unleashed. We're going to play the trailer or preview reel of that at the end of the episode. So please stick around and listen to the end of that after the listener submitted questions. Get a feel for what he's about. I've never met him in person. I can't wait to have the opportunity to meet Brent. But, Don and I talk about who we're going to support as pro staff every year. And we take it pretty serious because we have sponsors to this show. So we see both sides of it. Not only are we sponsoring people, but we're sponsored. And Don and I finally got to the point last year when this opportunity arose to where we could support Brent. And I'm not sure if it was you or I that first said it, but we said, we don't care if he really helps us sell one product for Real World, as long as he helps try to save one soul. And if anything, whether he talks about Real World or puts our brochure land management guide out on the table, that's fine. But this guy is he's a missionary here in North America to outdoors men and women. And we're just honored at Real World to be able to make decisions like this to there's some pro staff somewhere that called us and said, we want you to sponsor us. And we said no, because our money went to this guy. And it's the best investment we ever make because it's going towards the kingdom, not necessarily our market share. And I think God glorifies that. So stick around, listen to Brent's spiel and his preview video. It'll play at the end of this episode. For right now, let's take a quick break and listen to our spot from our title sponsor, Osseo Gear. And I saw a post. Did you see this? You probably didn't. You just been on the road. Joe is in Africa. The guy's crazy. He's hunting somewhere every time. He's in Africa right now, and he's in this hut out in the middle of the desert, and he pans the camera and he says African ozonics, and there is this pile of animal crap sitting on a chair steaming inside of the hut that they're in as cover scent. And I renamed it African Code Brown, but I don't know if he's seen it yet. It's probably in the middle of the night. But here's Osseo Gear with a feature spot. Thanks for their support of the podcast.
Osseo Gear introduces a premium line of bow hunting gear that is unmatched, pairing nature's finest camouflage with the best technological innovations. Osseo Gear brings whitetail bow hunters the gear they need to be the best at their craft. The unique camouflage mimics the intricate feather pattern of North America's greatest predatory creatures. Designed for invisibility, built for comfort, and engineered for function. Visit OsseoGear.com. That's ASIO Gear.com to start shopping. Osseo Gear. Prepare to be invisible.
Well, thanks to Osseo. Don, would you ever sit in a hut somewhere with a big pile of animal poop to give cover scent for you?
Well, to be honest, I don't even have any desire to go outside the country for any reason whatsoever. Yeah, I guess I've done a lot of crazy things as a deer hunter. So, if I was sitting in a blind here in the Midwest and I thought a steaming pile of poop would help me kill a 200-inch deer, I'd probably do it.
See, I think I pass enough gas in the tree stand that I don't have to worry about it. I create my own opportunity when it comes to that.
Yeah, well, you don't have to worry about anything getting downwind.
All right. Well, so we're going to try to shoehorn 6 questions in. Just a real quick update. We used it as the thumbnail for this episode. You called it. you said on this podcast weeks ago, based on what the old timers have always told you, and you understand of growing corn, some of the best yields you can have is when it's dry after planting, and then you get timely rains and it can put on huge yields. We got an update from our grower of NutriCrave corn. Walk us through what the feedback is so far.
Yeah, Dwayne Hopkins sent me some photos. I think it was Friday. We've got the 220 acres of NutriCrave growing for deer corn for this fall, and the farmer that's growing it for us, he went out in his field and pulled a small developing ear off the stalk, and I guess they've got some kind of formula where they count how many rows of corn are on that cob all the way around, and then how many kernels are in the row, and then something they tie in the population it was planted at as well. And whatever that formula is, this is almost so unbelievable. I'm a little bit hesitant to say it on this podcast, but that corn looks so good that the number that was thrown out was it could finish between 275 and 300 bushels an acre. Now, I don't know how it was done, and don't anybody hold me to that. They might have went out and picked the best ear they could find in the whole field. But we are very pleased, and you hit the nail on the head, Terry. When that rain came the 1st of July, the timing could not have been more perfect, because that corn had been stressed with drought from almost the time it had been planted. It had put on a fantastic root system, and then right when it's getting ready to pollinate, boom, the rain turns on, and it's not that far from me, and I got like 6 inches the first 10 days of July, and I'm sure they got somewhat similar over there. Maybe got a little more, a little less, but they got several inches right when that corn was just ready to start pollinating. And it kept coming for that, week or two right after. And we got more rain in the forecast this week. And so those corn plants were just, it couldn't have been timed any better. To the day, it couldn't have been timed any better.
Well, for the people that receive this rain, it just goes back to, kind of what you said early when we were dealing with the drought. Timely rain with that corn will absolutely make it blow up. And it doesn't really matter, honestly, if we have 200, 225, or 300 bushel an acre corn for deer corn. It's going to be more product we get to work with, especially as we're integrating it into new product development and in our complete feed. But the good news is we have a good crop going this year, and we'll be able to do what we have, barring any, hailstorms, tornadoes, that type of thing. We still got a long time before harvest that we're dealing the same pressures and anxiety for that as every farmer in the country that we know has to live with this on a daily basis. The other side of this is that drought. We talk about it being good for the corn. It really hurt the soybeans, especially a lot of our land consulting clients where we might recommend soybeans. It just did not produce enough growth to keep up with browse pressure. So we're hearing in from some people that the ones that couldn't replant or didn't get them sprayed, their beans aren't looking real well, because, when they first germinate, if you don't have moisture there, it's not a failure of the bean crop. It's a failure that they didn't get rain the right time to get those beans to blow up, to get ahead of the browse when you have deer pressure.
Right. And to be honest, the soybeans can do the very same thing this corn did. And I won't go and repeat myself again, but multiple times I've talked about 2012 when we didn't get rain until September. And that September rains absolutely exploded the soybeans, and had a fantastic soybean crop that year, despite the worst drought of my life. So don't give up on your soybeans. That you touched on it again, Terry. The worst thing about this drought on the soybeans has been the fact that they've stalled. The growth is kind of stalled, and they couldn't handle the browse pressure that they were getting. And, they never canopied over, so they had more weed competition. And if if we can just get some timely rains, well, this rain has exploded my soybeans. I've got by far the best spring planted plots I've probably ever had. My
Wow.
NutriCrave corn, I'm telling you, it is absolutely fantastic. My soybeans have exploded since July 1st. Barring some major event like a windstorm or hailstorm or something like that, my deer ought to be set for grain. Now I just got to supply some greens this fall with some fall planted blends, and my deer are going to be set for the winter.
Yeah, it's so hard for people to have patience, and I get it. We put a lot of time and money into it, but we talk about it over and over and over again on this podcast. Patience, keep them sprayed, keep the weeds down. You can make the decision in early September whether you're going to terminate that bean field if it's not producing enough to put a fall plot in. Don't worry about it right now. Keep the weeds out and let it ride. So, Don, if it's okay, let's go ahead and try to get some of these questions done. I got a feeling when I was scanning some of these that a couple of them might be a little bit lengthy answers. So if we got more time to talk at the end, we'll circle back with that. But let's get to the questions for the night.
Yep, the first one comes from Kevin Hecht from Centerville, South Dakota. It says, hello, Don and Terry. Don, friend and I were talking after listening to your latest podcast, and a hypothetical question came up. Would you ever consider selling your farm? I only have 2 bits to my name, so I couldn't make an offer. But if someone won the Powerball and offered you $20 million, would you sell it? How much would it take? Would you turn down $100 million? My friend and I disagreed on your answer and would like you to settle our debate. Thanks for your time, and thanks to you and Terry for the podcast and all that you do for so many people. Well, Kevin, congratulations on throwing out a question that nobody else has submitted before, or even anything close to it. Those are the kind of questions that are, those are the kind of questions that will get picked week in and week out. Something kind of off the wall. I'm telling you, it would be very, very, very tough for me to sell this farm because of my roots, and I'm talking my family roots before I was even born. A portion of this farm was my grandparents. My mom was born on this farm. It would take several times market value for me to even think about it. And when I shot my first 200-inch buck back in 2004, rumors were going around that, Bass Pro has offered him $100,000 and this and that. Well, those rumors were not true whatsoever, but I made a statement at that time. And at that time, my finances were not even close to what they are today. At that time, I was still, working hard, and I wasn't, starving or nothing. And we were keeping our bills paid. We was slowly getting ahead, but I wasn't in the position I was today. But even back then, even in those conditions, I made the statement, and it was absolutely true, that I would not take $1 million for that rack. And people said, well, you can have a replica made and blah, blah, blah. Let them have the real one. You still got the replica. I don't care. This is my life. This is what I worked my entire life for. I didn't work my entire life because of the money. It has nothing to do with the money. Why would I want somebody else to hang that on their wall that had nothing to do with it? They'll never appreciate it like I would appreciate it. So I'm one of those people. And also, if you know me at all, and Terry will back this up, I promise you, I have probably cost myself more money in the hunting industry than I ever made, because I can't keep my ethics, my principles, my mouth shut. I just can't. I mean, if you followed my social media just this week, not my Higgins Outdoors, but if you go to my personal Facebook page and read a couple of posts, I put people on notice that the reason this country is falling apart is because of them. And they're not bad people. They're good, honest, ethical people, but they don't have the guts to stand up and support their views. I mean, they'll do it privately. They'll even do it at the ballot box, but to stand up in front of a crowd and say, this is wrong, period. Anybody that believes this is wrong. Nobody's got the guts to do it. And so I've cost myself a lot of money in the hunting industry. And I could go even deeper into that thought, but I'll just leave it at that. If you think that you could come to my farm and just with a checkbook and just give me a blank check, I bet you if I did even consider filling it out, there'd be more zeros than you would have ever dreamed I would put on that check. It's not for sale. My roots are deep here.
Well, I think there's one takeaway or one thing that the people who've known you for a long time, even longer than me, like Al Foster and Joe Johnson and those guys, is one of the things people don't realize about both of us is we grew up with nothing. Not saying that I'm saying, early in your marriage, you've talked about the financial struggles you and Robin had. I grew up a preacher's kid. We didn't have anything. I came from a family that my dad helped start small churches when I was younger. So we moved around a lot. I remember it was a big deal when I got to go get a winter coat and pick it out in the summer on layaway, so it would be paid off by the time winter came around and I needed a coat. And my kids don't even come close to knowing what that struggle is. And the funny thing is I didn't even know I was poor. I mean, it was just the way of life I had. We weren't materialistic. So even though we both have very nice things now because our financial position, even though we've cost you a lot of money in the outdoor industry, I think in the last couple years we've positioned you well to where you're making money now. I hope we have anyway. It's much better now than what it has been with the companies growing. We never grew up in a materialistic thing where that meant anything to us. All of that could go away for both of us tomorrow. The John Deere tractor could go away. The side-by-sides could go away. The big nice houses that we both have could go away. And we'd be completely fine with it because that's not how we were raised. That's not our MO. So to say somebody could just come and throw money at something and buy us off, it's no different than buying your farm or offering us a deal on this podcast of something we didn't believe in. It's not worth that kind of money to us.
My good friend Todd Hewing paid me the ultimate compliment here recently. Todd has really added to his farm in the last 3 or 4 years. He's got hundreds and hundreds of acres continuous in one tract. He was offered a bunch of money by this solar energy group to come in, and I don't know if they was going to buy it or lease it, his farm, and 600 acres of it was going to be put into solar panels, and it was going to have a high chain link fence all around those solar panels. And Todd had already done a bunch of habitat work on that 600 acres, and they was going to come in and clear it all off and put their solar. And he called me up and he says, "You're probably one of only a couple people that I know that would give me that understand where I'm coming from." And he says, they're going to give me enough money that I would get a check every month for the rest of my life. And he told me what the figure was. I'm not going to share. It's nobody's business. But he said, the thing of it is, he says, I'm getting old enough. If I took that money, I'm going to have to go buy another farm somewhere, and then I'm going to have to develop it. He says, I don't have time for that anymore. And he says, this farm is right out my back door. He says, I can walk right out my back door and I'm there. And he says, what would you do? And he says, I know my dad would just roll over in his grave if he knew that I was even contemplating not taking the money. And he says, what would you do? And I said, I'll tell you what, I had 2 windmill companies stop by my house in about a week apart. And I said, I told them to get lost. I didn't care what it paid. I didn't want to look at the things. I didn't want any part of it. And he says, yeah, I had a feeling you was going to say that. And he says, you're probably one of only 2 people that I know that I could call and say that and hear that from. Because most people, it's all about the money. And for me, it's just, don't get me wrong. I absolutely appreciate the blessings financially that God has sent my way in recent years.
We've worked really hard.
Yeah, that didn't come without some sacrifice, but there's things way more important than money. Today I was talking about earlier in this podcast, my family. I mean, those things are invaluable, and this farm to me is almost invaluable, because this farm that I'm on, I was here from the day I was born. When I was my grandson's age, I was riding on the back of an F20 Farmall tractor, standing on the toolbar, not the toolbar, but the hitch bar on the back of that thing with my grandpa. Why would I walk away from that and sell it? I mean,
well,
I would just have to buy another piece.
I don't think that there's anything wrong with people deciding to cash out when it's something that has been made as an investment. That's no different than buying a, piece of stock or anything else. We're not saying it's wrong to make an investment and grow it, but I think where you're going at with this is your life's work. This was a family piece that you worked who knows how many hours of overtime or weekends when you had your own business to expand and buy more property to make it bigger. And that property, the layout of it, is your life's work. And you've worked, I don't know what, 40 years to develop it, and you're getting the benefits of that work, and your grandkids are going to get the benefit of it. That property's in a trust that goes to them. So I think there's a difference, that I want to make clear to people listening to this, that, we don't want to criticize people for making investments, and, that we all do that. But when it's something that's your life's work, there's just some things that can't be bought, whether that's this podcast, whether that's, your property, whether that's something. It could be something small. There's guns in my gun cabinet right now that it wouldn't matter how much money you offered me for it. They're not for sale. And I think everybody can relate to that. In this case, the question's about the farm.
Right.
Wildlife Farming is the leading e-commerce platform specializing in habitat management equipment. Our mission is to make available the equipment necessary for the development of wildlife habitat and improve conservation for hunting and recreational property. We carry flagship brands like the Genesis Drill and Goliath Roller, as well as the premier brands in planting, mowing, spraying, forestry management, and fencing equipment. Food plot and habitat goals vary. Wildlife Farming is the company that can deliver the equipment to achieve these goals. Equipment is our specialty. Our staff is trained and familiar with all the tractor and skid steer brands to make sure you get the right piece of equipment to get the job done right the first time. At Wildlife Farming, we only sell quality equipment, and we have the support and expertise you need. Please visit wildlifefarming.com for all of your equipment needs.
Okay, this one comes from Wilson Newswinger from Greenwich, Ohio. He says, "Hi, Don and Terry. I have a question for Don. If your target buck Babe would drop a few inches, would you still target him this coming season or give him another year? Also, I saw an ad in the Busy Beaver for a new hunting magazine being released that got me excited. It's supposed to have some great old school contributing authors and an editor by the name of Don Higgins. I subscribed immediately. Just wondered if you knew anything about this. Thanks, Wilson."
Well, I guess the cat's out of the bag.
Yeah, I was told I could release the info now this past week, so we might as well share the news that I was asked to be the editor of a new whitetail magazine called Whitetail Life, and I through a series of meetings with the owners. I have absolutely zero ownership. I want to make that clear. I have no ownership in this magazine. But after several meetings, conference calls with the owners, I seen that I was going to have the freedom with this magazine on the editorial content side to do whatever I wanted. And I'd actually, it was kind of a dream of mine for a lot of years to be a magazine editor, and I just kind of put it on the back burner because it's something I thought would never really happen. And then this comes along, and then they tell me they give me all the freedom that you can imagine to help them develop this magazine. And I agreed to do it. I told them right out of the gate, I said, this is probably not a long-term deal. I'm 60 years old. I've already got more on my plate than I need. You're probably looking at less than 5 years of me being the editor of this magazine, maybe only 2 years. I don't know. But I agreed to do it. So the name of the magazine is Whitetail Life. The first issue is October, November issue this fall. It'll come out at the end of September. We've already started working on it. What I'm working to set this magazine apart from all the others is the authors. I'm going after guys like Bobby Worthington, Joe Miles. Al Foster has agreed to come out of retirement. He wrote for North American Whitetail way back in the late 80s, early 90s. I've got him talked into coming out of retirement. I want to have the best stable of writers out there. And I mean, there's a lot of good writers, don't get me wrong, but these guys are veterans that have done it. They're not guys that are writing about unproven theories. They've done it. Sam Calora just killed the 3 giants in Iowa. Sam's going to be putting some articles in this magazine. I talked to the Wenzel brothers this week. In fact, I got a call from Gene Wenzel as I was sitting there at the Starbucks parking lot. We started the recording, and my phone rings. It's Gene Wenzel, but I haven't got a commitment out of them. Those guys have some health issues they're dealing with, and they're up there in age. But don't be surprised if somewhere down the road those guys are contributing. But yeah, if you're interested in subscribing, go to whitetaillife.com and you can subscribe right there. First issue's coming out in October, November, like I said. If you're a company that wants to advertise, I can tell you this, you're going to find the advertising rates some of the best in the whole industry. The first issue is going to have 150,000 copies printed. 70 some thousand of those are going to be direct mailed to folks that we have the mailing addresses for, just as a free introduction. The other 70 some thousand are going to be handed out free at some events. There's some sporting sport shows this winter. We're going to get the word out, but my end of things is I'm going to work to make sure that the articles in this magazine are some of the best out there. The writers are the best out there. There's not going to be any recipes. If you want to buy a cookbook, go buy a cookbook. We're not going to waste space on recipes, venison recipes, but whitetaillife.com, you can subscribe right there.
So I don't have a leg in this race. And, for once, you don't own part of the company. You're just an employee. So you're getting my perspective in life when it's just an employee with pretty much free reign to do what he wants. I know how that feels with you, but 2 things. The first one is the production quality of it is going to be first class. I saw some of the graphics work and preliminary artwork. It's going to be a first class magazine. It's not going to be like a black and white, halfway done publication. So for the people who want to invest in sponsor or subscription, I've seen it, unbiased opinion. It looks fantastic. The second thing is, I think this is going to appeal to 2 different people, meaning demographics of subscribers, if they give it a chance. The first one's going to be the people that are your age that want to reflect back on some of their heroes that pioneered this whole movement. And the second demographic is going to be the young guys that we get questions from week after week where they're just learning. The young hunters that want to learn the foundation and fundamentals of being an outdoorsman and a woodsman. This is the magazine for you, because the people that are going to be writing are not trying to sell you something. They're veterans that don't need to be doing this. I mean, think about it. The people you just named off, they don't need to be doing this anymore. But they're doing it for their love of the sport and their love of protecting the credibility of this sport to the next generation. So I think that this is a pivotal publication for the future of our sport, because it's going to tie a lot of, memories together for the people that are your age. And it's really going to be a useful, valuable tool for the younger guys coming into this to have basically the Hall of Fame writing, fundamentals of how whitetails act and think. And I'm just excited for it. I can't believe you're taking on something else, but it doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me. It's not about the job. It's about the big picture of what this does for the industry. And I think that's really the reason you're doing it.
Yeah. And, I don't want to let all the cat out of the bag, but there's going to be some things as far as columns and that. I've talked to Dr. Strickland about contributing as well. I'm pretty sure that's going to happen. I haven't got 100% confirmation, but very likely for that to happen. But the other thing that's going to force me to do is it's going to force me to step away from my strong opinions and allow people with different opinions to voice them in this magazine. This is not going to be, well, Don doesn't like this or that. He doesn't believe in this or that, so we're not ever going to hear about it. That's not the case at all. In fact, we're going to have one of the things we're going to do in some issues, not every issue, but we'll take a topic, whatever it may be, some controversial topic, and we'll have two different authors that have opposing views write their views on that topic. We want this magazine to be inclusive, not exclusive to a small minority of deer hunters. We want it inclusive. Another thing we're going to do is we're going to have a column where we've got a panel of, I don't really want to call them experts. We got a panel of really experienced, seasoned deer hunters where a person is going to submit a question. The readers can submit a question. And then from that panel, we're going to pick like 3 of those people to answer that question. So, your question may be, is it really, or I don't even know, is it important to have fruit trees on your deer property? Because this magazine is also going to have a strong land management theme as well. And then, maybe, I don't know. I don't want to give away who all the experts are, but 3 different people answer that question.
So, I mean, yeah, it's going to be, I might get my first issue of this in November and open it up and there's a Mechanical Broadhead ad right there on the first page. It's not going to be just Higgins's road or the highway with this. You have a podcast and a subscription website for that. That's not your role with this company. So don't think that it's going to be that. This is going to be people from a lot of different viewpoints and opinions, but accomplished people, not somebody trying to sell something necessarily to get more articles or a seminar schedule book. So I'm excited for that. While we're on this topic, before we go to number 3, we got some other stuff cooking that we probably ought to just tee up. We're going to be going to Florida for a live podcast. Is that right?
Yep. We're going to be in Florida in January.
So we want to really connect with the Southeast. So we know we have some listeners down there, but we're going to be coming down and doing an event. We'll announce the date as we know it. And if you have an idea or want us to come and do a live podcast, charity event, whatever, we can't promise we can do every one of them, but we definitely want to connect with our friends in the Southeast a little bit more. What else? There was something else you wanted to.
Well, I'm going to be I want to be doing an event in Delaware next March.
I think there's somebody made that in a question made mention of that. I'm speaking at a charity event in northern Indiana on September 12th. We'll announce more information. I agreed to that this week. We'll be at Shipshewana next year for a special event. I don't think we're allowed to talk necessarily about that yet, but you can count on us being in Shipshewana. I have a really big spinoff project that I'm working on that I can't say the details of it, but I pitched the idea to you and you've supported it 110%.
We're going to be in Michigan with a new sponsor and a kickoff event where we're going to do a live podcast up there.
Yeah. So we have a ton going on for this podcast, and the family that we've kind of built with you guys as listeners, we consider it a family. And even though we pick on liberals and that kind of stuff, we know that all of us are kind of like-minded when it comes, because there's not a lot of people that's going to tolerate talking about Jesus and that kind of stuff on here that's going to stick around. So we know the people that are here, even though our views keep going up, we're coming to you with as much as we can to continue to unite this thing. But we just got so much cooking. This magazine thing that you're the editor of is just one of the pieces of this, isn't it?
Yeah, there is. This thing just continues to grow, and I know it's just, I just feel in my heart that it's God opening doors because of how we've used our platform. And before we move on to the next question, Terry, I think that listener or that question, wasn't there another one at the beginning? Something about would I shoot Babe if he?
Yeah, if he dropped a few inches, would you still shoot him?
It's probably going to depend on just a lot of factors. I'd say he's 6 years old. I don't think that deer is going to hit 200 this year, just my guess, or ever. I just don't know that he's got what it takes. And the fact that there's some really, really good young bucks that I think could hit 200, I probably will. I'd say the odds are very good that I will target that buck, Babe, and hopefully get him shot this year,
or let me
some
shoot him.
of those younger bucks. Never know.
Never know.
You never know.
It's going to depend. I mean, we were both talking about this before we recorded tonight. We don't have enough intel of target bucks yet for this year. People are already trying to put their plans together and everything. We haven't really even done the first camera pull. The only real intel we have is what's coming in on some cell cameras. So my friend Patrick is actually en route to Illinois today, and he's going to pull some cards just because we're moving a tree stand. He wants to prep that area. But we really just don't have enough intel really to make any of those final decisions yet. And it's an exciting time of the year, right? I mean, it is. But it's like your food plots. We're just not ready to make the decision of what to do yet until we have all the facts. So
right.
I appreciate though that all of our listeners are on the edge of their seat wanting to know, the rest of the story. That's really cool. What they don't know is that there's a lot of other plans incorporating with what your plans are for harvest as a bigger picture on your home farm. That's going to be a great storyline for the rest of the year. So it's going to create a lot of good conversation and a lot of good questions from our listeners as we go.
Yep.
All right. Here's the next question. Here's your Delaware guy.
Okay. This comes from Keith Martin from Harrington, Delaware. He says, Don, Terry, first, excited to hear you are working on possibly coming to Delaware for a seminar next year. That would be amazing. 2 questions. It seems like on a lot of your trail cam pics, you have the camera low to the ground. Do you have a height you generally try to keep them off the ground, or isn't it a huge deal if they peg your camera light? Number 2, Delaware is a bait state. I have multiple mineral licks out on stumps, etc. I've heard some guys say it's better to hunt 50 to 100 yards off those areas. Do you have any thoughts on that? Hunt in bow range on them or hunt off of them a bit if you know their travel route? Does it matter? Appreciate the podcast and content. Keep up the good work. Look forward to seeing you guys in Delaware if it pans out. Well, Keith, first of all, is the height I put my camera. It just varies by the situation. I try to place it in such a way that the deer is not facing right at that camera at eye level. Sometimes that means putting it higher in a tree. Sometimes it means putting it on to the side of the trail rather than close looking down the trail, so the deer passes that camera instead of goes right towards it or right away from it. So that's a question that just doesn't have a firm answer. It's just situational. Every time I hang a camera.
But you are trying to get it to where their nose isn't facing the camera. I think right. That's a good way to answer it. Is you're trying to find a scenario where they're not just easily able to pick it off.
Right. Second part of that question is about hunting over a mineral lick. Well, in my state of Illinois, we can't put mineral out, so that's not anything I have really even experience with. Now, I do put the mineral out on my Ohio properties that I've owned, and but I've never hunted over it. That's just during the fall, the attraction to that mineral is minimal, really. The high attraction is in the spring and the summer right now. And as those antlers harden off and things, the attraction of that mineral really dies off in the fall. So I don't think it's that good for hunting anyway. Now, a bait pile would be something totally different, but that's not what you asked about. So I don't have a good answer for that. If I was, I guess, going to hunt, I would probably move off of that. I think the more pressure you put on there, the more reluctant a mature buck is going to be to utilize it anyway at all. So
If
I'd
you
probably
hunt,
hunt a travel route.
corn piles are a big thing in Ohio and Kentucky, and I can tell you that if you are going to hunt on the pile or on the feeder, you better have foolproof access to get out of it with deer within 20, 30 yards of you. Because as soon as you have to leave and all the deer are just then getting to the feeder, you just promoted a lot of nocturnal doe activity to that feeder, which is going to be nocturnal activity for every deer eventually. So it all depends on the spot and the access to it. But if you think about it, usually if you're running a camera on a bait pile or a feeder, most of your buck activity is either going to be in a weird time during the day, or it's going to be right at dark, and it's going to be low shooting light. So getting them 100 yards from there, if you can figure out a way to lay out your property, we work on a lot with clients here in Ohio and Kentucky, to where you get away from it, or you have foolproof access to be able to get out of there without blowing a bunch of deer out. Because the last thing you want is getting out of your tree stand or blind, blowing 6-7 deer out, one of them potentially being a buck on the edge of the woods looking to see if it's safe to come out or not.
Yep.
Access is everything, right?
For a good stand site, it is. If you don't have good access, you don't have a good stand.
All right. Here's our next one.
So this one comes from Mark Yoder from Apple Creek, Ohio. He says, hello, Don and Terry. Thanks for all the great podcasts you do every week. With fall food plotting just around the corner, I'd like to try your Deadly Dozen blend. My question is, why do you have sugar beets in the blend? I've had several well-respected seed companies say to never buy a fall blend with sugar beets in it, as they'll never mature being planted that late, and it's just a selling point to get you to buy it, seeing there's sugar beets in it and should be planted in spring when corn is planted. I'm new to food plotting and I'm sure you have a good reason why. Thanks and God bless. Mark, I absolutely do have a good reason why. That's why I picked your question. So here's, first of all, I don't know who you're calling a well-respected seed company. My guess is you probably got a whole lot respect for them, more respect for them than I do. Next.
That's
the
funny.
reason.
There's a few people listening to this podcast right now that are laughing as hard as I am right now because they understand what you just said, and that's funny.
Yeah. So, Mark, I want you to first of all, I want you to consider something. In our Deadly Dozen blend, yes, we have sugar beets in it. And let me tell you something, sugar beets are one of the most expensive seeds in that blend, maybe the most expensive seed in that blend. We're not doing that for financial purposes like the other companies that are telling you, leading you astray. Maybe I don't know their reasoning, but maybe they just don't want to put that expensive seed in theirs. Now, here's what I can tell you, is that when you plant Deadly Dozen with 12 plant species in that mix, there's going to be some of those species that the deer hit right out of the gate. There's going to be species that they hit mid-season, maybe late October or 1st November. And then there's going to be species they hit late in the year. Well, those sugar beets, when they come out of the ground, they're not eating the beet. You're right that those beets, if we was planting them to grow a beet, we would do it in the summer or the spring. They're going to eat that green top. And the two plants in deadly dozen that those deer are going to hit first and foremost is going to be the sugar beets and the Austrian winter peas. In fact, they will hit them to the point where you swear none of it grew. Well, it grew all right. It's just the first thing that came up and the deer hit it. And what's that do for you, the deer hunter? Well, it gets that there's no place else they're going to find sugar beets that time of the year, even the greens. So what are they going to do? They're going to come and they're going to hammer your plot and sniff out those sugar beets and those Austrian winter peas, and that's going to get them coming back and coming back. And as those other plants come into season and reach their peak palatability, those deer are coming back. Then they'll move on and they'll start, picking other plants out of that mix. If we was only doing that from a marketing standpoint, it cost us more money to have those beets in there than to not. There is an absolute reason for it.
The opposite side of that would be the purple top turnip that's in there that the deer will not touch until probably January or February when the nitrate level goes down and everybody says the sugar comes up. It's the nitrate level coming down to where the deer find it palatable and attractive. So you got to have something on the early side. You got to have something on the late side. But I assure you, the stuff that people are saying they would never put in, ironically, it's always the most expensive piece of the puzzle. Did you notice that? Minerals the same way. The stuff people say that not to put in there, it's always the most expensive.
And we got another question coming up that we're going to hit on this topic again.
Okay. We ready to move on to the next one then?
Yep.
I think I have you primed. You're about ready to tee off on one here. I see it in your eyes. All the Amish people listening on an MTech can't see it in your eyes right now. They're listening on their phone. I can see it.
Well, all I need is the right question. So this one comes from Steve Schieber from Chillicothe, Missouri. He says, Don and Terry, thanks for all you do. We have been uniquely blessed with rain in northwest Missouri to the point that it's been very challenging to spray food plots with all the rain. Is there ever a time when it's past the point of being beneficial to spray a weedy plot due to the weeds just being too large and widespread? Also concerning weeds, I understand that native browse makes up the majority of a whitetail's diet, and this presumably would include such weeds as ragweed that are quite nutritious and preferred by deer. If that is correct, while I realize that not all weeds are browsed and they can impact plot production, is that necessary to have a clean crop no matter the time and cost? Lastly, with all the emphasis upon diversity within our deer plots, isn't it advantageous to, within reason, allow volunteer corn within soybean plots to provide multiple feeding options for deer? God bless, Steve Schieber. Well, Steve, let me start it there at your last question about the volunteer corn and soybeans. That's not a good idea because most of that volunteer corn is not even going to put an ear on. If it does produce any kind of ear at all, it's going to be a little ear about the size of your thumb with 3 kernels on it.
Is that a pollination? Is that pollination? Explain why, so people understand why.
That's part of it is the pollination, but also, the corn that we're planting in our plots is a hybrid corn. It's created by breeding a specific male corn to specific female corn to create that hybrid, planting that seed from the hybrid. Once the hybrid's produced and grown, and then you go plant that seed, you do not get that same hybrid.
That's why when you're driving through Iowa or Indiana and you'll look out a corn row and the tops of the corn where it's tasseled is chopped off by a machine. It looks like somebody mowed it at 6 or 7 feet tall. And then there'll be corn beside it that's tasseled. That's how they're raising seed corn to blend male and female. But just letting volunteer corn doesn't help really anything.
Right. I compare it to apples. Like if you would go out and pick an apple and plant the seed out of that apple, that seed is not going to be the same as that parent tree. If you want the same, you got to clone it. So you cut and you graft a branch off of that tree to the root of another tree to create a clone of that apple. It's the same way with this corn. What you get from the seed is not going to be the same. as what that hybrid that you've bought. So you're not going to get much production at all by allowing that volunteer corn to grow out there. Moving on to the weed part of the question, here's my issue with weedy plots. He makes a very good point that the deer do browse on those weeds, and those weeds can have a lot of nutritional value. But here's where I have the issue. Those weeds, when are they there? They're there in the summer when highly nutritious food is available everywhere. And what are we trying to do in our plots? Well, a good land manager in his plot, he's trying to grow a nutritious food source for the winter months. Now, or fall into the winter. I mean, a good land manager wants to get his deer through the entire winter with quality food on his property, and having those weeds in those plots, those weeds are going to have no nutritional value once they die. You're not going to see deer out there eating, dead ragweeds that have been brown for 2 months out in the field. Those ragweeds, though, they have cut down on your grain production, whether it be corn or soybeans. And they've limited the amount of good quality, nutritious food that you're going to produce for your deer later in the winter. I've seen it probably more this summer than ever, but the deer really like water hemp. In the water hemp that I got growing like along the edge of my plots where it's not sprayed, wow. They just browse that stuff. Every single plant, every branch on every plant will be browsed. They love this stuff, but you can't allow water hemp to take over your corn and soybean plots, because this winter that water hemp is going to provide those deer absolutely nothing. So the deal I think you should do everything you can to control weeds in your plots, because those weeds are going to affect the volume, the quantity, not the quality, but the quantity of food that those plots are providing. So that's why we want to control the weeds in our plots.
All right. Good question. Yep. I saw we were on the way to Frankfort, Kentucky for a softball tournament this morning. And as I was driving, I was looking out over a soybean field just outside of Georgetown, and a guy had a bean field that had quite a bit of volunteer corn come up. And I know he probably sprayed it with clethodim, which is one of the popular chemicals that farmers use. I know there's others, but to kill volunteer corn in the soybeans, because you could see these corn stalks coming up randomly at different parts that had already turned brown. So farmers don't like that volunteer corn either.
I said we had another question on food plots and seeds that I was going to get to and get me fired up. Well, actually, we just got that in today. It's going to be on next week's podcast.
Oh, okay.
It's not on today's list, but
okay.
Give people a reason to listen next week.
Save it for next week.
It's a really good one. It was sent to me in an email. A friend of mine asking me the question. I said, you need to submit that to Chasing Giants, because I would like to answer that one on the air. And he did that. So next week we'll have that one. So next question comes from Lucas Hagan from Newcomerstown, Ohio. He says, Don and Terry, a neighbor of mine who is a dealer for Real World, introduced me to your podcast, and I have been hooked for the last year. I am 20 years old and have hunted for all my life, but it wasn't until the last few years that I have become more interested in habitat and wildlife management. My first question is, if you had to give one piece of advice for the younger generation, what would it be? Then my second question is, what's something that you wish you would have done sooner or regretted along your journey of chasing giants? I would appreciate an answer from both Don and Terry's own experiences. I'm looking to shave years off the learning curve and can't thank you guys enough for the information you put out. I really appreciate the honesty with your show and the great role models you are in your walk with Christ. Thank you. Well, Lucas, I could give you a lot of, my mind always goes when a young person asks for advice, my mind goes away from specific deer hunting and land management advice to more life advice and keeping your priorities in order. But I think you're looking for very specific advice as far as hunting and land management. So I'll stick with that. The thing that really comes to mind for me is it took me a lot of years to recognize how important freedom of human intrusion is on a hunting property. I literally ruined and burned out more properties than I can even remember when I was younger, because I didn't recognize that it was me that was causing the deer to leave a property. I'd get permission on a new property and there'd be deer everywhere, and I'd get a few hunts in where I seen deer every hunt, and it quickly tapered off to where I was seeing no deer. And then I would come back the next year, and yeah, the first couple hunts were pretty decent, but they weren't as good as the first year. And then boom, the no deer. And I just thought that these deer were just randomly going around and living in this wood lot for a while, and then they'd go live in that one for a while. Well, I finally realized that the problem was me. It wasn't the deer, it wasn't other hunters. The problem was me. I was burning out these properties. And I think from a land management perspective, creating a sanctuary and keeping it as totally free of human intrusion as possible is the probably biggest lesson that I've ever learned. You got to hunt those bucks where they spend their daylight hours, and those bucks are going to spend their daylight hours where they have encountered the least amount of human intrusion in their life. And it doesn't take long for you to take a buck's safe area and cause him to totally vacate it and go find another one. If you are very careful about how you hunt your property, you have a sanctuary, you hunt the edges of that sanctuary, you always hunt with the wind right, you always have good access to your stands, you can keep that deer bedded there day after day after day. And eventually you're going to get a crack at him. Too many guys, and I was just as guilty as anybody, too many deer hunters want to run in, find the best tree on the whole property where they're most likely to see the buck, and that's where they hang their stand, and they'll get a good hunt or two most of the time. But then it's slowly and usually it's not even slowly, usually it's very quickly, that property or that area is burned out, and you're back to looking for another good spot. So sanctuaries, freedom of human intrusion, that is probably the biggest thing that I learned that really made my success skyrocket.
Growing up in a bait state, I always thought it was about the food. And it sounds funny that you and I are talking that it's not the most important. I remember we were sitting at a restaurant across the river from Louisville, Kentucky, with Dave Barrett and Johnny Pace. They used to host the Pro Talk Outdoors. And it was the first time I'd seen you kind of jot down on a piece of paper, even though we'd talked about it for years. And this is a lot of years ago. I mean, this is good grief. This was a lot of years ago. But you drew out how a mature buck uses the wind leaving bedding area when he's going to feed versus how he uses the wind when he's just moving about or during the rut to check it. And I was like, is it really that simple? And that was the game changer for me. It's when you grow up in a bait state area, you think it's all about that corn pile. It's all about the food plot. It's all about, getting there before they come in, even if you're worried about the wind. But what is, I wish I would have known very early in my career, especially hunting Illinois before 2012 when it was absolute prime, is either identify or create bedding area where you have access and knowing where to sit in certain wind conditions or wind directions. And I'm telling you, it's not difficult. It just has to click. And when it clicks, the amount of crazy day morning encounters you have during the rut, the amount of deer you see coming in to feed at night, it's life-changing. And that's why I think the Whitetail Master Academy is really good about, it's easy to talk about it on the podcast, but really hard to explain. The way you and Steve lay that stuff out with video and graphics, I think it's a little bit easier to understand. But I know you said intrusion. I'm going to take it a step further. And if you want to kill 5-year-old bucks or older, understand that wind and understand how they're using that wind related to bedding. And if you don't have bedding, creating bedding on a property where you have access. That's the golden nugget, in my opinion. That's When it clicks, it clicks. That's, I know it's hard to explain saying that, but when you finally see it, those fluke mornings where you see all those bucks running and crazy, I still believe those mornings happen every morning. It's just whether you're in the right spot or not.
Yep. That's a great answer.
All right, so I want to circle back just a little bit. That was the 6th question of the night, and we're running a little bit long. I'm going to ask a little bit of a prayer request from everybody, because I know this family kind of supports us. Don, please remember him in your prayers as it relates to this pivotal piece, him being an editor of this magazine. Because the more we kind of promote this whole thing, the more we help support Brent Henderson, which you're going to hear his video in a little bit, the more people listen to this podcast. I think the more people are out there listening to the message of Christ, and the more places we go to with podcasts, the more spinoffs we do of this show that I'm undertaking right now. I think that this is still going to be a ministry that's glorified by God, hopefully, if we do the right thing. We hope it's glorified by God, but keep us in your prayers. I mean, even Real World, we are coming out with a new marketing slogan for 2024 that applies to us as an organization just as much as it applies to our customers, right? I mean, it's we have a lot of big things in the works in so many different directions between, Don and myself and the teams that we work with. So it's exhausting some days, but it's extremely rewarding when we get the comments and messages from all of you back every week.
Yeah, this thing just keeps growing to the point where I really wonder how big it might end up getting, because now I'm looking at an extra email account every day. I was doing the Higgins Outdoors email and then the Real World email. Now I've got the Whitetail Life email. I'm getting questions coming in. Summer is supposed to be the slow time for me anyway, but I'm still going every day. I looked back at my calendar in June. I had so many things scribbled on various dates during that month that was supposed to be a month I did little or nothing. And I'm not complaining whatsoever. God continues to open doors, and very grateful for that. And I just want everybody out there to know how much we appreciate them. They make it possible. And, the message that we deliver, a lot of people don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear, as soon as they hear us start preaching, they are looking for another podcast. We're not going to listen to them boys. And we appreciate each of you that does stick around every week.
Well, we had a funny story to share, and we actually forgot about it at the beginning, and as that relates to supplemental feeding. And let's just save that till next week, because Kentucky's going to be opening up their supplemental feeding on August 1st. So maybe that'll be a good kickoff video, because I don't want people to jump off of here because we're running a little long without hearing the message of Brent's new podcast called Unleashed. We're going to play it just after Don signs off and before our closing outro. So again, keep us in your prayers. We got a lot cooking, but we're so blessed to have all of your all support. It means more than we can ever say.
Absolutely. So God bless everyone. See you guys next week.
Take care.
You were never designed for mediocrity. You were designed for greatness. You were created in the image of the living God. So what lies have you been buying into? What cage have you allowed yourself to be locked in? It's time to break free. You may be broken, but you are not conquered. You may feel alone, but you are never alone. You've been surrounded and filled by the very presence and the power of God, for you possess the roar within. Haters are going to hate no matter what you do. So what side are you going to choose? Why would you give power to those that didn't create you, that didn't die for you? They don't deserve that kind of power. Only the one who made you does, and he made you to be dangerous. Dangerous for good. You, my friend, were made with a divine purpose, so never, ever quit. Are you ready to follow the purpose God created just for you? Then stop underestimating yourself. Stop comparing yourself to others. Get on your knees and then get on your feet. You are one of a kind. You are unique. And you were made for this very time in history. So rise up. My faith wasn't forged in Sunday school. It wasn't strengthened while trying to play it safe or keep all the rules. No, it's when I discovered grace. When I was on my face, broken, empty and ashamed, and didn't think I could ever get back up. You see, that kind of faith didn't come through meeting some kind of standard or trying to get others to like me. My faith was forged when I'd been abandoned, when I was alone except for one. And that one who never left me, his name is Jesus. When others ran away from me, he ran to me. When others condemned me for my sin, he reached out his nail-scarred hands and said, "You're forgiven." You see, Jesus became my everything. He became my only one true compass. He's my sword, my shield, my strength, my refuge, my entire reason for living. Are you willing to rise up and resist the evil in this world? Are you ready to take a stand and let your voice be heard? Then it's time to roar, my friend. It's time to become unleashed.
Chasing Giants has been brought to you by Osseo Camo, Via Farm Real Estate Company, 360 Hunting Blinds, Victory Chevrolet, Real World Wildlife Products, Matthews Archery, Novix Tree Stands, Gingerich Tree Farm, WildlifeFarming.com, Quiet Cat, and Vortex Optics. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode of Chasing Giants.